Hi everybody, Jason here from spiritualbabies.net, and you're here with us for our first show on the book of Yoel, or Joel. I'm definitely going to call it Joel for this because it's a relatively new letter, the J, and I want to use it. And I know I won't be able to keep up Yoel for the whole thing. We are being guided through this relatively small book by Rabbi Neely. You know him from a ton of other stuff we've done. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, always my pleasure.
Usually at the beginning, I say I'm going to ask the questions that people might be asking at home, and come to this kind of fresh and new, even if I've gone through it. But I have next to no inkling about Yoel. I've done it wrong. Joel, I've never read through it at all, so this is absolutely going to be the first time. So, is there anything worth asking at the beginning? Do we know what kind of period it was in? What Joel's life was like as a prophet?
So that's the question, right? When did this take place? Because most of the prophets will tell us that it was in the reign of so-and-so, or will at least be referenced by some other prophet, so that we can at least hopefully guess, if not have outright information of when exactly this Navi, when exactly this prophet lived. Yoel has nothing. So that doesn't mean we just throw up our hands. It means we speculate, but every interpretation of when he lived is speculation. So there is an idea in the Talmud that Yoel lived during the time of Jehoram, that was the son of Ahab, and this is based off the idea that Elisha had prophesied that there would be 7 years of famine, and we're going to see a 7-year famine during this prophecy of Yoel. Okay. So the idea being 7 and 7, he must have been around during that time. However, the idea that there's a 7-year famine, it doesn't have to be 7 consecutive years. It could have been handled in other ways, Years of famine doesn't mean necessarily sequentially. It just means, a year of famine, a year not of famine, a year of famine, a year not. You do that 7 times, and you've had 7 years of famine. So that's another reason why people try to attribute him elsewhere. One of the other locations that he is famously put as is being one of the sons of Samuel. So the sons of Samuel are not given a great reputation in the book of Samuel, but the idea from this midrash is that they repented, or at least one of them did, and that this eldest one of them became a Navi and shared his prophecies in these chapters of his book.
Which is awkward because the first line doesn't mention Samuel,
It mentions a different name. Now there's an explanation for that. So the idea is that it says that his father's name is Petuel for Joel, and the idea is that this is Pitael, that that Samuel placated God with his prayers. So the idea is that the name Petuel is more of a description rather than an actual name. Okay. So it'd be the placator of God. So he is the son of the placator of God. Who was the placator of God? Well, that was Samuel. And if you just check my notes here, that's based off Samuel 7:6, and there's the Rashi talks about that based off the midrash for Samuel 1:6. So there is other reasons in that why they get around the different name that's being used here for the father. But like I said,
okay,
there is no confirmation. You read through the commentators, and they'll say, there are some who think, and then there are other phrases like, there's no way for us to know. And according to the simple message, I like the Ibn Ezra on this, right? He says, there's no way for us to know what generation was his. And according to the plain meaning of the text, it's not the son of Samuel. But, and then goes on, to try and hypothesize anyway. So that's where we are. We end up with the beautiful prophecies of Yoel, and we will never know for certain who he was.
That's kind of interesting then, because it turns them into something that's an everyman book. Because you can't pin it down to one period, then it could be for any period.
Well, like most prophecies are intended to be. There's a rabbinic teaching that, of course, there were more prophets than these that we have in the text. We get glimpses of there being whole communities of prophets back in the day, and plus they also argue that there was more done by each of these prophets than what we still have. That Isaiah said more than what we have recorded. That Jeremiah said more than what we have recorded. But we only preserved, or we only were told to preserve, those prophecies that would be important for later generations to have. That there was prophecies that they gave that were of very immediate, specific usage to their generation. And those prophecies, were given, were fulfilled, and then were left because they were not going to be applicable or relevant or even necessarily of worthwhile guidance to later generations. So what we have is the stuff we're supposed to have.
Now, the audience, we have at the beginning there in line 1, the word of the Lord came to Joel, son of Pethuel, and it said, listen. So is Yoel speaking to Israel? Because I know that there's a few occasions when that's not the case, when the prophet's speaking to a different group.
Oh, this definitely seems to be directed to the community of Israel. Yes, that like I said, there's maybe a debate of whether he's talking to all of Israel or whether he's talking to the northern tribes, the actual kingdom of Israel, as opposed to the people of Israel. That depends on where you put him in the timeline. I should also point out there is a third opinion that he was a prophet during the time of Nahum and Habakkuk. During the time of Manasseh, the king of Judah. So he could be speaking to either everyone or the northern kingdom or the southern kingdom, depending upon how you interpret him. But it definitely was a Jewish audience that he was facing.
Okay. Well, certainly the first chapter seems to have a very specific theme. I'll read a couple of maybe 2 and 3, and then we'll stop, and then we'll have a look and see what we can tease out from some of the descriptions. Okay. The word of the Lord that came to Yoel, son of Pethuel. Listen to this, O elders, give ear, all the inhabitants of the land. Has the like of this happened in your days, or in the days of your fathers? Tell your children about it, and let your children tell theirs, and their children the next generation.
All right, so a wonderful preamble.
What the cutter has left, the locust has devoured. What the locust has left, the grub has devoured. And what the grub has left, the hopper has devoured. So with this reference, you were talking about a great famine. And these are the different stages, I suppose, of just saying that there's literally nothing left in the field, nothing left on the trees.
Possibly. It seems likely, both from traditional commentary and modern scholarship, that the terms that are being used here are actually 4 different types of locust, or perhaps some argue 4 different stages in the locust life cycle. But what it seems to be implying is that there will be wave after wave after wave of destruction of the crops. So that when you have the locusts come through and they leave, if there's anything left over, don't get happy, because the next wave is coming and it will eat more. And then the next wave is coming and it will eat more. So there's a number of things that the commentaries do with this. One thing that they say is that this is to try and show that this is miraculous. It's not normal for a ravenous swarm of locusts to leave anything behind. That locusts don't leave over anything. But the idea that there would be a portion left over, a little bit and a little bit and a little bit and a little bit for each one, is to show that this is being divinely ordained. And it's also giving a break in between each one, presumably so that there is time for tshuva, for people to come back.
Okay.
And when we get to line 6, there's going to be a different interpretation of all of this locusts.
Ooh, okay. Wake up, you drunkards, and weep. Wail, all you swillers of wine, for the new wine that is denied you. We've had cases before when we've gone through some of the minor prophets where they've talked about people that were drunk. So are we now to imply that this famine is as a result of Israel's actions?
Well, all of the threats and punishments that come through the words of the prophets are a result of Israel's behavior and refusal to acknowledge and refusal to repent and refusal to correct. So that is certainly a case, but we haven't yet been told exactly what we've done wrong.
For a nation has invaded my land, vast beyond counting, with teeth like the teeth of a lion, with the fangs of a lion's breed. I see. So now we can look at the locusts not as locusts, but as a human equivalent coming in and ransacking and ravaging the land.
Exactly, and that's exactly what Abarbanel does. He says that these are different invading armies. Each one of the locust stages is a different army, and then, of course, different commentators will try to identify. So, which one were the Babylonians? Which ones were the Seleucids? Which ones were the Romans? And so on and so forth.
I wonder. I just am thinking in my own mind about the use of a lion as a. Because for me, you generally place a lion from this point in history. The Lion of Judah is quite a popular thing, but then there's lions do pop up in other biblical stories all the time. I'm rambling. I'll cut that right out. But yeah, my brain's just now I'm at work thinking, I wonder what the lion meant.
Well, people often forget that the lion was native to the land of Israel. Everyone thinks of lions now as being only in one particular part of Africa, but they used to have a much wider range. And should also point out that there are two different terms being used here for lion. We have the Aryeh and then we have the Lavi, right? So that there's two different terms that's being used. One is probably a younger lion, like a cub.
It's one of the issues, isn't it? Like I'm reading this in English, and I see a kind of an attempt at biblical poetry because I see the words coming up twice, but my mind's telling me they're not going to be the same word because that would have been lazy on part of the writer.
Well, that's because there is same wordedness in many parts of biblical poetry because it creates a certain parallel structure that was pleasing to the biblical poets and audience that doesn't sound right to the modern English reader because we are used to our lovely robust vocabulary in English where we have 30 different words for any different thing. And so we're always picking, whichever extra one we think gives us the extra poetry. Biblical poetry didn't work off that same template. No. But in this particular case, there are two different words that are being used. And so it does seem to be saying that there will be the teeth of the lion and that there will be it's variously translated. I think I've seen fangs, I've seen, molars, of the lion cub. But it definitely is using a wholly separate word, which is still related to lion for the younger one. And again, this may be also trying to say that, there's the devastation that's going to come from, for example, the Babylonians, but there will also be devastation from lesser kingdoms that come after the Babylonians. We always had a certain amount of respect for Babylon, and it was almost a certain pride that, getting taken down by Babylon is no great shame. It's like getting beaten by Mike Tyson back in the day. It's like, well, yeah, okay. But being beaten by Mike Tyson Jr. When he was only 8 years old, that's going to be even more embarrassing.
Okay. They have laid my vines waste and splintered my fig trees. They have stripped off their bark and thrown it away. Their runners have turned white. Now, I was kind of okay until we got to the runners part.
So there are runners and then there are runners. So there are other translations that translate not as runners, but as the branches, which fits the overall poetry a little bit tighter. I think, in my personal opinion.
Mm.
And I think the term runners here may even be trying to refer to that term as the British term. That is to say, runners like runner beans,
Mm.
the bits that are offshoots of plants,
Okay.
rather than somebody that is jogging down the street. Because
Sure.
it's certainly not the word for somebody that is a runner
Mm.
in the sense like, someone that does marathons. That's not the Hebrew word at all. It's the thing that is sent out from the plant,
So it's very
which
much talking about something on a vine or on a frame or that's climbing up something.
or even just the smaller tendrils that come off
Mm.
of a tree, or if it's specifically talking about either the vines or the fig trees, it's unclear by this point. So if it's the runners that come off the vine, then most people have seen those things because that's how vines work. If it's the thinner branches of a fig tree, the new shoot kind of parts. Well, the whole point is, of course, that it's been exposed and dying,
Mm.
that it is being obliterated because of the attacks.
And that's why the new wine, I assume, has been denied in verse 5.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Lament, like a maiden girt. That's just not used enough, that term. Lament, like a maiden girt with sackcloth for the husband of her youth. Now, is this maiden girt with sackcloth for the husband of her youth because her husband is no more? And because sackcloth is usually, for me, something that's associated with repentance. We've got the sackcloth and ashes. But is there something else happening here?
No, it is exactly. She is in mourning when she should be rejoicing.
Okay.
It's the metaphor that's being used here is supposed to be one of the more emotionally poignant or tragic metaphors that other people would recognize immediately. If I say there's an 85-year-old woman whose husband has passed away and they had 60 years together, you would think, oh, that's touching and that's sad, but it happens in 65 years, blah blah blah. And if I told you there's a woman whose husband died on their wedding day before they actually got married, and she had to take off her wedding dress and put on like widow's garb, I think you would feel a bit more sorrow at that image. That is more tragic. That is more painful than someone who enjoyed 60 years together of married life. Okay. And that's exactly what Yoel is going for here, is saying that it can be interpreted either way. Either that they were married, but he died soon after their marriage, sort of during the honeymoon period. Which is a reminder that the term betula, which is being translated here as maiden, which could be literally translated as virgin, can also be used like the English term maiden, which means it's not always about a physical condition for the person. Or it could mean literally that they had gone through the betrothal process, which in the ancient world was separated by a substantial piece of time before the finalization of the marriage. And in between the betrothal and the final part of the marriage, including the consummation, he died. And that is an especially sad state of widowhood.
Okay.
And you should be sad like she would be sad, meaning you're going to have something that is among the most tragic of things happen to you.
Offering and libation have ceased from the house of the Lord. The priests must mourn who minister to the Lord. Now that's a clue, isn't it? To at least some area of time where we can assume this was pointed to, because we've got a practicing temple.
Yes, exactly right. So definitely we have a practicing temple happening at the time, and that's going to grind to a halt. And it also, of course, the specific mention of libation, of the nesech, is reminding us of the wine that we've been told before has dried up. If there's no wine for people to go around drinking, then certainly there's no wine as well for the offerings.
The country is ravaged. The ground must mourn, for the new grain is ravaged. The new wine is dried up. The new oil has failed. Farmers are dismayed, and vine dressers wail over wheat and barley, for the crops of the field are lost. So it gives the impression that it's not so much that the product's been taken, but it's just been destroyed. Ravaged and dried up, and the oil has failed sounds kind of like there's been an ecological incident, or it's been burned, or something else, rather than it's been stolen or taken.
So, and that's, one of the ways to interpret, again, back to our fourth type of locust, is to say that it may not have been only one thing that caused these years of famine. If you had, 1 year of famine because of invasion, and 1 year of famine because of drought, and 1 year of famine because of insects, and 1 year of famine because there was, the rain at the wrong season, and 1 year of famine because, we were unable to go out and harvest because we were forced to go fight in some other war, but not because the enemy actually destroyed it. There are many different reasons in the ancient world why you would starve. If all of those happened sequentially, or even just close to each other, it would be like you'd never be able to catch your breath. It's literally one disaster after another. But all of them in the ancient world, of course, would weigh most heavily upon the agricultural field, because that's what most people worked on, and that was what was most vulnerable to disruption. If you didn't plant at the right time, if you didn't harvest at the right time, or if other environmental things happened at the wrong time, then you were in real trouble. And there wasn't a supermarket to go and bail you out from the failed crops.
The vine has dried up, the fig tree withers, pomegranate, palm, and apple. All these trees of the field are sere. I thought I read it wrong. All the trees of the field are sere, and the joy has dried up among men. Gird yourselves and lament, O priests. Wail, O ministers of the altar. Come spend the night in sackcloth, O ministers of my God. For offering and libation are withheld from the house of your God. So now Yoel's speaking directly to the temple employees. They are to be leading, by the look of it, their repentance. So I know that we spoke before about how the priests were getting drunk and leaning on the altar, and it feels that this is a result of the similar kind of action, especially if they're starting with the priests. They're not starting with the... Yoel isn't saying to the farmers, you are the cause of the beginning of this issue. It seems like he's squaring it straight at the priests.
Well, it's a combination, right? So the temple service was always meant to be a reflection of the bounty of the nation. The actual tamid offerings, the daily offerings, were fairly minor compared to what a nation would produce. But the offerings that would come to the priests were as a tithe from the people, or of goodwill offerings, or the holiday offerings. That was contingent upon the success of the people, and the success agriculturally of the people. So if you realize that the economy is failing, then no one's going to be able to support the temple either. And that means even the things that used to be almost taken for granted as the joyous times when people would come together with what they had, that's not going to be happening. And yeah, if you're a priest, that's doubly frightful, because the farmer may have some things that are stored away, but what have the priests got stored away? They've got no food to feed themselves. They're wholly dependent upon whether or not the people bring anything.
Solemnize a fast. Now, my brain instantly says, well, they didn't really have much choice because of they've got no...
You mean, is it really a fast if you're forced to not eat because you've got nothing?
It's like choosing to walk into work when the bus doesn't run.
Right, but it is still a fast because even when there is little, you're still trying to find something to eat, and you will still eat what you can find, even if it's rationed. A fast means that you are deliberately not eating, even if there are some scraps available, and that you are choosing to avoid precisely for the purpose of acknowledging your guilt.
So Yom Kippur situation.
Right, exactly.
Do we have any idea because of this? Is there any continuance or remembrance or is this just a one-off?
This is a one-off.
Okay.
Yeah, fasts throughout Jewish history have often been called at different moments of calamity or reflection. and those did not become permanent on the calendar. There are only a few additional permanent days that were added to the calendar for fasting, most of which were connected to the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians and other things that happened on those days in history.
Solemnize a fast, proclaim an assembly, gather the elders, all the inhabitants of the land, in the house of the Lord your God, and cry out to the Lord. Alas, for the day of the Lord is near. It shall come like havoc from Shaddai. Shaddai, you don't really see. I mean, it's El Shaddai's term used for God occasionally, but just on its own, that seems. I'm reading from Sepharia, and it seems unusual for them to have that word here as an English kind of language word, as opposed to a description of what the word means.
Well, so Shaddai, it depends on your translation. Sometimes you'll see Shaddai translated as Almighty, which is why a lot of people who only read the Bible up through the book of Genesis will often refer to God as God Almighty, because El Shaddai is used in the earlier book more than later books. It's usually a good way to find that the person didn't bother to keep reading. But the Malbim, interestingly, points to the idea of the word Shaddai being used here, and says that that's actually trying to tell us something here, that what Shaddai can often mean in the rabbinic understanding is God who is able to go beyond nature, meaning God is not bound by natural law. And he argues then that what this is trying to say by the usage of the word Shaddai is that the things that are happening will be beyond the normal scope of nature, meaning the famine that's all being described here is going to be worse than you would ever imagine naturally could happen. And that also means there will be no natural solution to it. Don't believe you can do what Joseph did and just store up for it and everything will be fine. That this 7 years of famine that's being described here is not a call to better economic planning. This is a warning that you will not be able to escape it. And the usage of the word Shaddai, says Malbim, is specifically trying to drive that point home.
Okay. For food is cut off before our very eyes, and joy and gladness from the house of our God. The seeds have shriveled under their clods. The granaries are desolate, barns are in ruins, and the new grain has failed. How the beasts groan! The herds of cattle are bewildered because they have no pasture, and the flocks of sheep are dazed. So it's not just the agriculture and the vineyards, it's the livestock as well.
Correct.
To you, O Lord, I call, for fire has consumed the pastures in the wilderness, and flame has devoured all the trees of the countryside. Now, I'm guessing that you can take that literally or not. I know that when in certain areas around the world, when it's super hot and things get very dried out, you do get random fires sweeping through fields and forests. But I assume this could also mean figurative flame.
Well, exactly. And I think the JPS translation goes to figurative and calls it a scorching heat, with the idea that fire has destroyed everything in the field. But it could be rendered either way. Like you said, I grew up in San Diego where brush fires during the summer months, when everything was dry and turned to tinder, that was quite common. So the idea that this was an actual fire due to heat is also very, very plausible. One thing I want to point out about this section is, you may have noticed, is that we've shifted to a present tense. We had been talking about future tense.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that these things are going to happen way back at the beginning. But there's a debate about this particular chapter of whether or not Joel is rendering an account of what he is witnessing, or whether he is prophesying a future event, or whether he is prophesying a future event and recounting its actual fulfillment. So it's open for debate of whether this is meant to be taken as it's happening, it will happen, or it will happen, oh, now it is.
The very beasts of the field cry out to you, for the watercourses are dried up, and the fire has consumed the pastures in the wilderness. And that is the end of chapter 1. Wow. All right. Okay. Great. Thank you very much for leading us through. I very appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you.
You guys at home, episode 2 will be along shortly. This is going to be a 3 or 4 program series, and then hopefully we're going to go on to Ruth. That's overriding. When I asked people what they wanted Ruth, and
Okay.
and
I mean, I can't blame them. It's a great story.
yeah, and it's got such huge themes, and there's lots of really interesting kind of rabbit trails to go through on those as well. Head over to Rabbi Neely's YouTube channel. There'll be a little bubble at the top of the screen on the right hand side, and there's a link underneath. There are weekly videos that are well worth your time. And share this on Facebook if you can. I appreciate it. And we'll see you all very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Excellent.